Welcome everyone to our 2022 image analysis training. While we are waiting for folks to hop on, I just wanted to introduce our friend from Wyoming. One of our project participants, Rob Tolley, saw this moose today and wanted to share a message that she is looking for a male moose with good antlers who's willing to travel. So thanks, Rob, for sharing. We'll give folks just one more minute to hop on and you can enjoy Algae Gal. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Woodbury. I am Communications and Outreach Director at Sageland Collaborative, and I am just really happy to have you all here. I love to see you joining, see some familiar names popping up. And as we begin this training, like we always do, we just want to take a moment to acknowledge that many of us are on Indigenous, ancestral, and traditional lands. So if you're based in or near Salt Lake City, like we are at Sageland Collaborative, we are on the ancestral lands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute people. So as we're involved with these images that are from across the Wasatch, we just invite each of us to immerse ourselves in the histories and current realities of local Indigenous groups. There's a wonderful app called Native Land. That's a great place to start. There are lots of other resources online just to learn whose land you're on. And then we also want to note that Sageland Collaborative and our partners on this project really value the diverse perspectives and experiences among our volunteers, staff, and partners. So just note that our DEI policy is on our website. Essentially, we just ask that we all treat everyone on this project with respect. And we invite anyone, if you have questions or if you notice something, to please reach out to me or anyone on the Sageland staff. We're happy to help. And then just a couple of housekeeping items as we get started here. So questions can be submitted anytime. If you navigate to the bottom of your screen, you will notice a little Q&A. And so you can click that anytime and pop a question in there. And during our Q&A sessions, we will answer those. And then also note that we might share some links in the chat box as we go along that are just for your reference. Don't try to record all the links though, because those will be included in a follow-up email. So yeah, no need to save those links. And then moving to our agenda, we will start with a background on the project, and then we'll move to the training itself, and then we'll have a brief Q&A session. And with that, I'd love to introduce our speakers. So I am just excited as always to present with these folks. So Dr. Mary Pendergast will be talking to you first. Mary has a PhD from Utah State University in biology and community ecology. And she has been with Sageland Collaborative for, I think, 8 years now, if that's right, Mary, as an ecologist and conservation biologist. And after her, we will be hearing from Austin Green, who recently received his PhD from the University of Utah, yay, and is now a postdoctoral fellow there. And Austin studies how human influence affects mammal distribution and behavior, all in an effort to apply this knowledge to wildlife conservation on the ground. And so before we start, just one more thank you for caring about wildlife. Our presenters will talk about this project and how it impacts wildlife here and in the country. But I just want to say that this work is only possible because of you. So on behalf of wildlife, thank you for being here. Mary.
All right, hopefully you all can hear me now. Thanks so much for the introduction, Sarah, and for being here, Austin. Just a little bit about Sageland Collaborative. We strive to provide science-based strategies for wildlife and wildlands. And you can see a little bit about what we do here. You can see our conservation priorities are really focused on things like promoting habitat connectivity, protecting species in conservation need, and restoring vital habitats. And we do this by applying some pretty fundamental strategies. We try to apply objective conservation science, establish strategic partnerships, both like locally, nationally, and regionally. And we also often facilitate community science engagement if those data gaps for wildlife and their habitats kind of lend themselves to protocols that community scientists can learn and develop, so you can help us collect those data in a timely way and for a much larger geographic area than we could otherwise do on our own or with our academic partners. So folks that are familiar with Sageland have probably seen this slide before, but for those who are new to us, and just a brief bit about the way we work. So we often start with a fundamental ecological question, like where are wildlife moving on a landscape? What's the current condition of habitat? Things like that. And then we often partner with an academic institution, a research lab, similar to Austin Green's lab at the University of Utah. And then we look at what are those information or data gaps, either about habitat or species on the landscape, that if we could fill those knowledge gaps, could help us get to a conservation strategy. So in the case of Wasatch Wildlife Watch, if you can get folks trained up to do a standardized protocol for moving trail cameras, maintaining trail cameras, and in the case of this training, analyzing and sorting wildlife images from said trail cameras, then you all can help us as community scientists get closer to those conservation strategies. So of course, this work could not be done without the support of community. Not only our community scientists, but we also have local nonprofit partners, state and federal agency partners, and you'll even see there is Snapshot USA, which is kind of a national organization, and the Urban Wildlife Information Network. And I think we also have a global partner where folks are contributing data from all over the world that are similar to Wasatch Wildlife Watch. And by putting all those data together and kind of meta-analyses, we're getting at pretty fundamental questions about how wildlife use the landscape. And this study in the Wasatch is contributing to answering some of those big questions. So a little bit about our project area before we get started, especially for folks that might be new to the project. Just for reference, this area, this kind of green polygon here, is what we refer to as the Central Wasatch or the Wasatch Mountain Range. And it's roughly 32,400 hectares. And just to make a little relative comparison for you here, all 5 national parks make up approximately 345,000 hectares. And it's pretty mind-blowing, but the Wasatch visitation for recreation and tourism annually is roughly the same for all 5 national parks combined as it is for the Central Wasatch Range. So it's kind of mind-blowing. A lot of you are familiar with, in particular, the winter recreation, but now we're getting all sorts of recreation and tourism activities year-round as well. So with that in mind, as we're getting more and more anthropogenic activity in the Central Wasatch Mountains, one of the questions that often comes up is, how do we balance all this increased activity, habitat use by humans? How do we balance that with maintaining things like habitat connectivity for wildlife and healthy watersheds and functioning ecosystems on a landscape scale? Some of you may be familiar with the different processes that are always ongoing, trying to move people in and out of these canyons, especially some of the canyons that are just one way in and one way out, managing those varying needs on the forest, right? So all sorts of different users and types of activities. And with this increased visitation, there's all sorts of transportation plans in the works, things like widening roads, and even changing the form of transportation that we get in and out of these canyons. So with those planning processes going on, it would be really wonderful if we had some baseline information about where wildlife move, where core habitats occur, where important linkages or maybe impediments to wildlife movement on the landscape occur, so that we could use that to inform our transportation plans. So cue the Wasatch Wildlife Watch. This project is a community science approach to filling wildlife data gaps along what we've referred to as the wildland-urban interface. So there's varying levels of anthropogenic disturbance, human use, change to the landscape as you move from the Salt Lake Valley, closer to the more urban areas. And then as you move up into the mountains, all the way into wilderness areas. And there's all sorts of different habitat disturbance or changes on the landscape mixed in, right? We have little oases in the city, thinking about the Jordan River, parks, cemeteries, campuses, right? And then we also have highly developed areas in the mountains around ski resorts, right? And everything in between. So that's what we talk about as the wild urban interface, and thinking about how wildlife move through those areas and use them differently. Wasatch Wildlife Watch, it will be going into its 6th year of existence in 2023. And again, we could not collect these data for the duration of time and for this large landscape scale without that ongoing community support from folks like you participating tonight. Again, project established in 2018, and just some stats for Wasatch Wildlife Watch in 2022. So we've logged over 8,700 volunteer hours, over 2,520 plus camera stations, over 40,000 animal detections. This number for volunteers is higher these days, but this is kind of the data we have so far, 750 plus volunteers, and then 13 peer-reviewed publications, and that number just keeps going up. We have a few publications in review and a couple others being developed, so we'll be approaching 20 scientific publications here in the next probably 6 months to a year from Wasatch Wildlife Watch gathered community science data. Some of you have seen this slide, but we just wanted to give you a peek at some of the results from these research projects and from these peer-reviewed articles. So here, for those of you who aren't familiar, this red line is indicating Highway 80. And you can see that that corridor is essentially disrupting what is otherwise a heat map for habitat use. And this represents all the mammals across the study area that are picked up by the trail cameras. So you can see kind of this division in habitat use and the influence of that I-80 corridor. This is that same heat map type of data, but just for mountain lion habitat use. And so you can see kind of an even more dramatic demarcation from that highway. So these sorts of data are what are needed in order to get a better understanding of where the best locations may be for developing things like wildlife overpasses and underpasses, to make sure we're avoiding vehicle wildlife collisions, and better understanding how those core habitats are being used and where important linkages might be, so that we can either increase or maintain the level of habitat connectivity we have for different species at a given time. Now, this is really exciting. I really appreciate Austin sharing the most recent news. Another research paper that just got accepted by the Journal of Animal Behavior was just 2 days ago. Austin found out it was accepted by the journal, which is super exciting. So we're happy to share this kind of hot off the press with you all. And what we're looking at is this concept of weekend effect. So we're really interested in understanding the effects of human influence on wildlife behavior. And data from Wasatch Wildlife Watch is helping us do exactly that. So for example, trail camera data were used to assess whether periodic increases in human recreational activity had an influence on mammal activity and those patterns of movement on the landscape. And whether or not we pick them up on the trail camera is how we are getting that sort of information. So specifically, we were testing whether an increase in human recreation during the weekend had an effect on mammal activity patterns. So here you can see there's definitely a human activity increase on the weekend. However, the activity pattern changes drastically from the weekday to the weekend. So weekend is this blue dotted line. You can see there's a spike in activity kind of in the middle of the day. And then this red line during the weekday, there's a spike in the early morning and another spike in the early evening, which is kind of what you might expect to see. And then what this image is showing you is basically habitat use across species picked up by the trail cameras. So mostly mammals, we say, from the size of like a beaver to a moose. Or I guess we get squirrels and things like that too. So we'll say squirrel to a moose. And what you see is basically not much difference between the weekend and weekday activity. So the change in human activity pattern led to kind of a lack of behavioral response across mammalian species, at least for those species picked up by our trail cameras, showing little to no response in that weekend effect compared to weekday activity. So this study really highlights the possibility that altering the timing of human activity or the presence of humans on the landscape and those patterns of human presence, especially during periods of high recreation. For example, we could use this to serve as a human-wildlife conflict or mitigation strategy. So as we increase the duration of activity and the magnitude of human activity on the landscape, thinking about the timing and how that could affect different species could be really helpful to kind of avoid, potential negative effects or vehicle or human wildlife conflicts. So we wanted to break up this presentation with some fun trivia. And I think what we're going to do, chime in if I'm wrong, Sarah, but I think what we're going to do is ask the question and then we'll just give you a little bit of time. Oh, I guess we've got a survey here. So you can see how you fare on our trivia questions. So this first question is, at what age can moose calves outrun an adult human? And we went ahead and made this multiple choice. Is it 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 months? And while you guys are thinking about that, I just want to give a shout out to, we have lots of backcountry hunters and anglers that volunteer on this project and put a lot of time out in the field. And folks that move trail cameras in the Wasatch have probably encountered moose and know how to behave and give them their space. So hopefully no one is attempting to outrun moose calves, but it just gives you a relative comparison of how fast calves can move and at what point can they move that quickly. So maybe I will let Sarah tell us when to stop the poll.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a good number of folks in there. So most said 5 days.
That is correct. Yeah, you guys know your stuff. I would say that it probably depends on what the understory vegetation is like too, because they're pretty wobbly, but yeah, they can move. So nice. We've got some folks that know their stuff. Okay. So now it is time to dive into our actual presentation. Austin is going to take it away with some of the details on how to participate in the image analysis.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mary. And thank you, Sarah, for an awesome introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining in. It's great to see so many people have signed up to do image analysis. At the end of the day, this is what makes this project go. So the gathering of data, setting up the cameras is always the most fun part of the project. And it's absolutely vital to get those photos so we can understand what's going on. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to leverage those photos into actual scientific data. And this is where that happens. This actual image analysis is really where that gets going. And so thank you all for signing up for this. This is really, like I said, what keeps this project running and what allows us to produce this science, like Mary was talking about, that can have actual conservation implications. That weekend effect paper, we're really excited about that because it was kind of the first step towards producing science that has a direct conservation outcome, where we can actually apply what we're using and what we're learning from this project to affect how humans can better recreate along a landscape that coexists with wildlife. And so it was really interesting. And that is the type of information we're really diving into now because we have such a great data set. That's the type of investigations that we're starting to look into, is this interflux between human recreational activity, human influence, and animal behavior, so we can better understand how we can coexist with all these amazing animals, but still enjoy this awesome recreational opportunity. So again, thank you very much, and super stoked to have all of you here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if possible, and we will dive right into this. And so can I get a thumbs up that I am sharing the correct screen, and that you guys are seeing the Sageland Collaborative Wasatch Wildlife Watch webpage? Can Mary or Sarah kind of?
Yep.
Okay, great. And so first things first is that this is going to be kind of the lifeblood for anything that I'm talking about today. We're going to have, this recording, and this is going to be available for everybody. But I also want everyone to know that you don't have to be frantically taking notes today as we go through this, because all of the resources that we're going to talk about are available on this page. And so if you need a refresher as we're going through this, you can go to the Sageland Collaborative's Wasatch Wildlife Watch page and you can find everything you need. And so specifically, the first thing that you'll want to note as we scroll down here is that the new training, so the recording for this year, will be posted right here in this area. This is last year's training, but we will update this with this year's training relatively quickly. So that's the first thing to note, that if you need to go back to refresh your mind on what we talked about today, you can find this training right there. And then just as importantly, under these additional image analysis resources, everything that we're going to talk about today is going to be listed right here in these 3 documents. And so that's actually where we're going to start for this portion of the training, is at these 3 different resources right here. And so this first one, this step-by-step image analysis guide, that's going to be kind of the bread and butter of this entire training. If you, for whatever reason, get tripped up as you're going through the process, this is the first thing to refer back to. It will go over each and every step that we're going to go over today. And it's actually going to be used as the guide for what we're going to do during this actual training. So this is really where to go if you have any trouble with that. The next one is a video, and it's actually just a YouTube video. It's relatively short. It's about 17 minutes or so. And that's going to be where I actually walk through tagging individual wildlife photographs. We're going to spend a little bit of time doing that today, but since this video is available, the actual tagging of the images, that can be seen right here. And so this is actually going to be a requirement for the vast majority of you before you can get up and running, is to take a look at this video. And you can scroll through it, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to look through the introduction if you don't want to, and you can go to the specific portions of the video that actually work best for you. And then the last thing is a mammal identification reference. It's really important that we get these identifications correct. And a lot of the times it can be difficult to know what animal is what from a particular photo. And the first thing is to always skip any type of identification that you're not 100% certain about. But if you would like to take, a second and look at this identification guide, because you're kind of on the cusp of whether or not you think this is a mule deer or a moose or something like that, you can refer back to this guide and it will kind of point you in the right direction for what you should be looking for. So right there, I am going to now move into actually setting up your Wildlife Insights account. And that's kind of the first step in the game here. And so this is what happens if you click on that link for the step-by-step guide for Wildlife Insights. and this is actually the best place to go to figure out how to create your account. For whatever reason, Wildlife Insights likes to have a lot of steps to set up an account. And if any of you out there have currently set up your Wildlife Insights account, you know what I'm talking about. You have to sign in, you have to create an account, you have to verify your email, and then you have to apply for approval. And so it's pretty intense. It's basically, to me, it's the closest thing to government clearance that you can get. But we're going to walk you through each and every one of those steps right now so that no one gets tripped up, because this sometimes can get people a little bit confused because they'll verify their email, they'll think their account's up and running, but they may miss a couple steps. And so this is the best place to go to kind of reiterate what exactly it is you need in order to create your account within Wildlife Insights. So the first thing here is create an account. You're going to want to, of course, navigate to the Wildlife Insights homepage. That's where everything's going to get started. And this is what that homepage looks like. From there, you click on the sign in button. And if you're new to Wildlife Insights, it'll pull up a sign in screen like this, where you'll have the option to sign up for Wildlife Insights. And you're going to go ahead and click on that. Once you create an account, this is also where you log in for your email and your password. But right now you're going to sign up to Wildlife Insights by clicking on this button, and it's going to ask you to fill out the required information. And that required information is basically just your name, what type of email address you're using to sign up, and then your password. You're going to go and you're going to fill that information out and click on the sign up button on the bottom of that page. After you do that, you will receive this verification email that says verify your account. And a lot of people stop at this point before going any further. And it's important to note that this actually isn't the last step to setting up your Wildlife Insights account. So once you get this email, you click on this verify account button, and it'll tell you that your email has been verified. And that will be a separate email that will have this attached to it, where it will say, please apply for account approval. I don't know why it does this, and I'm not entirely sure why Wildlife Insights has this built in. It's extra security for them, but basically the developers of the program have to personally approve each account that's created before it can be added to a specific project. And so by verifying your email, you have a verified account, but you haven't been approved to access any specific project. And in that case, you have to apply for account approval, and that's what this step is. And so you have to apply for that account approval. And once you do that, then your account is approved. It'll have you fill out a little bit of information about yourself and what project you're interested in. Once that's approved, now you're ready to get added to the Wasatch Wildlife Watch project. And so then you're down to your last step. And during that last step, all you have to do is send me your email address that you signed up for and say that my account has been approved within Wildlife Insights. Here is the email I used to sign up. From there, I will add you to the account. I will add you to the project, and you'll receive your final invite email that says that you have been given tagger access to the project, and it will most likely be the Wasatch Wildlife Watch Community Science Project that you'll be added to. So that is the step to go through it. And so just to kind of reiterate that, what you'll do is you'll set up your initial account, and that's where you provide your email and your password. You'll then verify your email. You'll then apply for approval, and then you'll send me your email, and I will do the final invitation. So it's a 4-step process to get Wildlife Insights assigned to Wasatch Wildlife Watch. Again, if there's any issues with that, this process or this guide will walk you through step by step how to get to the finish line for that. And again, also, if you have any questions as we're going through this, feel free to put them in the Q&A or ask once we're done with this. I know it's a kind of tedious process to get your account approved in Wildlife Insights. I wish it was a little bit simpler than it is, but they take their security really seriously, and that's ultimately a really good thing for us. And so then the next thing is actually, what do you do when you have your SD card, you have your account, and you are ready to start uploading photos to the system. So the first thing you're going to do is what we call pre-sorting photos. And so this is going to be not usually through this Google Drive photo, but what you'll be doing is working with your particular SD cards. And so whether or not you're given SD cards from someone that participated in the project previously, or you are working with your own SD cards, you will be downloading and uploading photos directly from those SD cards. And what we'll need to do, since the system is very sensitive to large numbers of photos, is if possible, we want to remove photos that we call blank photos before we actually upload to the system. So this is actually done before you upload to Wildlife Insights. This is where you'll actually put your SD card into your computer. You'll register and read all of the photos in, and then you will go through and pre-sort those photos and remove or delete the ones that are 100% empty of any mammal in the photo. Once that is ready, then your photos and your SD cards are primed, or they're ready to actually be uploaded into the system. And so then that's when you will go to this step right here, where once you have your SD card, it's pre-sorted and the photos are ready to be uploaded into the system, I will need to go into Wildlife Insights and create your account or your site so that you can upload photos to it. And I can't do that without the following information. And all of this information will be provided to you once you get the SD card. But I will need the name of the site, and that will be, again, provided to you, or it's in the packet that you have if you're directly using your own SD card. And so I'll need the name of the site. I'll need the GPS coordinates, the setup date, and the takedown date. I'll need the landscape feature of interest, and that will be located on the data sheets that are associated with each SD card. Specifically, it'll say something like wildlife trail, hiking trail, or stream. And then I'll just need any notes or oddities that whoever ended up setting up that camera might have put in there. And so that could be something like camera malfunctioned from this day to this day, or there was a problem in the uploading process, or the camera's photos were all green or yellow during this period of time. Typically, the SD cards don't have many problems, and so most of the data sheets we'll be working with don't have any notes or don't have any oddities. But if they're there, it's good to note that in the actual system. And those are the main things that I'll need. Once I have those, I can then create your site and assign it to you so that you're ready to upload those photos. If you are uploading straight from the SD card, there is also no need to download photos to your personal computer. I know a lot of people like to do that, but it is not necessary unless you want to and you feel more comfortable with having a backup on your own computer. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have any issues with the steps leading up to actual upload of your photos, you can follow these steps here in the guide, and it should lead you step by step to the point where we're ready to actually upload photos. Before we go any further, I don't know if this is a good time to stop for questions on this portion or not, or if you would like to just continue. Mary or Sarah, do you have a preference?
So Austin, I think a point of clarification, folks will be able to participate even if they don't have an SD card, right? Can you just reiterate that the uploading photos will be uploaded? And yeah. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. So a large fraction of people may be participating without actual access to the SD cards or without SD cards that they gathered in the field. You are still able to participate. What you'll need to do in that particular case is just email me that your account has been created. And once you email me with that account creation, also just note that you are not in possession of any direct or physical SD cards. In that particular case, your job is made a little bit easier because I will go in and I will upload the photos for you from the direct SD cards and then direct you to which site you'll be tagging wildlife for. So that's a really great question. Thank you for clarifying that. If you're here and simply going to help tag the images in the in the Wildlife Insights program, you don't have to have access to the SD card directly. And we can work together on that, where I'll be uploading photos and then just directing you to which site you'll be tagging images from.
And Melinda asked a specific question about working with their own SD cards, which were handed back to you.
Right. Yes. So if you handed your SD cards in during equipment return and you would like to look through the photos from those, the easiest thing will probably be to either A, schedule a time to come to the University of Utah and upload those photographs in the lab, where I will have access to that and I can help you through that. Or you can get notified by me once I have time to upload those SD cards at the lab at the U myself. And so that would be a process where it's really up to the person. If they want to come in directly to the University of Utah and upload those photographs in lab, they're more than welcome to. Or option B would be that I would notify them as soon as I'm able to upload those photos for them.
And when we get lots of photos updated to the website that people who have accounts can just start sorting, we will also send folks who have signed up for this training just an email letting them know, like, there's a backlog, there's photos up.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And there most likely will come a time when there's quite a bit of a backlog in the system. And at that point, the great thing about Wildlife Insights, and I'll show you as we walk through this process, is that it's a community science upload process. And so that means that we are able to actually kind of go through and work as a group to uploading these photos, which is really quite nice. Okay, excellent. So this is great. And if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we can address them as we go along. Now we'll kind of walk through a little bit of how to actually work within the Wildlife Insights system and how to access the project, how to access your individual photos, and stuff like that. And so before we get there, this is the link to the video that shows how to actually tag images within the Wildlife Insights system. I highly recommend that you take a look at this before trying to upload your photos individually. And it has, like I said, different sections. And so if you're only interested in uploading photos, you only have to tune into this section. If you're only interested in identifying animals and learning how to do that, you can tune into those specific sections. It's a rather short video, but it's pretty informative. And so please take a look at that if you have any questions beyond what we're going to go over today. Okay. And then last but definitely not least, this is the mammal identification guide. This was made by a TA of mine a little bit ago named Emily Young. So a huge shout out to Emily. But this will walk you through actually really nice identifications and defining characteristics for the vast majority of the most common mammals that we will see in the cameras. And so if you have a hard time identifying the different ungulate species, this will walk you through how to actually identify them, what particular features and physical characteristics you should look for to differentiate between these different species. It'll also tell you both a breakdown, the defining characteristics, as well as examples that you can look for in the photos. And you may think that you're an expert in wildlife identification, and I definitely thought that I was when I started, but it is really tough, especially once you start looking at photos like this. Where we're no longer dealing with really nice, clear photos of what is and is not a coyote. It starts getting really difficult. And so really kind of leaning on these defining characteristics can make it very helpful identifying the more difficult to identify species that we have, like elk and mule deer, or coyote and red fox, or all of our crazy squirrel species, where it can get really difficult to identify which one's which. This is a really great guide to help you through that process. And at the end of the day, you will get better and better and better the more photos that you identify. You'll start picking up on those patterns to the point that the moment that photo appears, you have a decent idea of what that animal is without really having to pay too much attention to it. But it really does take practice. And it definitely behooves anybody that's working on this to take a look at this guide before starting it. Okay. So now we'll actually get into Wildlife Insights. And so when we go to Wildlife Insights, this is the homepage that you'll see. And we'll go, and once you've created an account, you'll click on the sign in button. and that will sign you in. Usually it's automatic depending on which type of settings you have on your computer. And from there, it'll take you to this screen, which is really kind of a blank screen, but it'll have your account listed up here. It'll have your details, and you can change account details there. There is one thing that I highly recommend within the account that everyone changes. So if you go to your account details, you'll see that there's this little box here that you can check that says use common name. That's actually not checked by default. And so if you don't do that, when you go to identify photos, and let's say you see a mule deer and you type in mule deer, nothing will pull up because it'll expect you to be typing in Otocoileus hemionus, which is the scientific name of mule deer. And if you are not familiar with all the scientific names, that can get really difficult and really frustrating. But it's a really quick change. If you just go to your account, you click account details, and you check the box that says use common names and save those changes, it'll then allow you to type in things like mule deer, moose, bobcat, instead of having to type in their actual scientific names. The next thing you'll want to do, and this is where you'll go to actually access the photos from the program, is to the Manage tab in your Wildlife Insights account. That will take you to all of the projects that you are a part of within Wildlife Insights. And so most of you will not have access to all of the projects that are listed here. And many of you will only have access to this Wasatch Wildlife Watch project, and then the associated sub-project, which is the community science project that we've been talking about today. And so that is where you'll actually access the photos from the system. And so if you are working with your own SD card, you'll upload those photos first, and we'll walk through that at the very end. If you're not, and you're looking to be a tagger that's uploading photos that are already in the system, your next step would be to simply click into the community science sub-project right there. That will take you to the actual sub-project where you'll see this homepage for it. And this homepage basically is a summary of what type of animals we're looking at, the total number of images that are in the system for this particular sub-project, identified species. It's really just kind of a summary of the things that we're looking at. But the two most important aspects in this particular project that are important to look at when you're going into tag is the Identify tab and the Catalog tab. And so once photos start getting uploaded to the system, the Identify tag will have a red number associated with it that'll actually dictate how many photos are currently loaded into the system and that need to be identified. Currently, all of the photos within Wasatch Wildlife Watch that have been uploaded to the system have actually already been identified. So we're right now sitting on 0 images. Again, this is why it's so important that you're coming to this training today to work on this, because we want this to be continuously uploaded to. And so having breaks where we're at those 0 images means that we're not getting extra data put into the system. And so this is why it's so important that we have so many interested people here working on this, because this is what's going to keep this data flowing through the system so we can continuously upload it to the data set. And then importantly, all identified images then go into this cataloged folder. And so one common question that I get is, let's say you upload a photo from an SD card for a particular site, and then you, instead of identifying them all the minute you upload them, you take a few days or you spend some time on the weekend or whatever, and then you come back to it and you notice that there's 0 photos left in the Identify tab. Typically, that's because someone else has then gone into the system and identified the photos that you uploaded. And you can check that by going into the catalog portion of the community science project and searching your specific camera deployment. If your specific camera deployment you see has actually been uploaded, you can click on that and you can see the images that have been tagged, and you can know whether or not those images have been tagged by someone or if there was an error in your upload. But typically, when you upload your photos, they'll all show up right here, and they should be available for you to identify for at least a couple days or so before someone else comes in and tags them. But one thing I wanted to show you within here is that when you go to upload photos, there's this burst option that you can select, and that allows you to group photos. And that's actually really important. So let's say you're uploading 2,000 photos into Wildlife Insights. And those photos come from cameras that set up and take photos in bursts. What you can do is select 60 seconds. So you can just basically go into this burst and select 60 seconds as your burst threshold, and it will group the photos into what we call wildlife events, where it'll associate any photo that's taken within 60 seconds of the subsequent photo. It'll actually group those together. And that's really important because that's our threshold for identifying what is a specific, what's one wildlife event compared to another wildlife event. And it also makes it so instead of having to identify 2,000 individual photos, you now only have to identify 200 or 300 sequences of photos. And so to show you what that actually looks like in person, I'm going to go to a different project that I'm a part of that does that automatically, that sequences those photos into 60 seconds. And so this is the Snapshot USA project, which is something that Wasatch Wildlife Watch contributes to, but only during the fall field season. And so these are all photos, because I've selected here the Utah sub-project. These are all photos from the Utah sub-project of Snapshot USA, which is our Salt Lake City portion of Wasatch Wildlife Watch. And so what I've done now is selected those, and now you can see all of the photos that have been uploaded to Snapshot USA from the Utah sub-project that need to be identified. And what it's showing here is that it has sequenced those photos into groups or into bursts of captures. And so you'll see the actual thumbnail of the first image for whatever burst that you're uploading. And then you'll see the number of photos that are associated with that particular sequence right up here at the top right. And this is actually where you go to start looking through and identifying individual photographs. And so let's go through one in particular. Let's see if there's anyone here that's a fairly easy to identify animal. Right there, there we go. So let's go through this sequence. So we clicked on a sequence that has an animal that we believe we can identify in the system. And so the first thing you do when you click on the sequence is it will pull up every photo from the sequence. And you might notice at first glance that these photos are actually really small. And that's because they're currently in thumbnail position. You can enlarge them by clicking on this icon right here. And this will pull up a little bit larger of a photo so you can see a little bit more clearly what you're actually looking at. The next thing you'll notice is that if the Wildlife Insights artificial intelligence has picked up the presence of an animal, it will it will put a red box around where it believes that animal is. And you'll also notice then it will give you a guess of what it believes that animal is. And it'll associate that with a confidence level and the number of photos. This system is getting better and better every single year, and really kind of every single time you upload a photo, but it's still not excellent. And so if you're going to be using the artificial intelligence to help you identify all of your animals, there's a very good chance that you'll be tagging animals incorrectly. In this particular case, the computer did happen to get it correct, but that's not always what happens. So this is where you can use, and you can tag animals individually right within this system. You can also, let's say if this animal still isn't clear to us, we don't know exactly what we're looking at here, you can click on the individual image within the sequence, and it will pull up a full screen view of that actual animal. Another thing to note here is that if you're looking through this, the way Wildlife Insights uploads photos is it stores a granulized or pixelated photo of within each system as what it technically archives, but it still has access to the high resolution image that the camera trap itself actually took. So let's say we still couldn't identify what this animal is. We can click right here on the view high resolution image, and it'll pull up the original image of that animal that was taken from the camera trap. And so then if let's say we still were unsure or we had to zoom in, you can use the zoom in or the zoom in, zoom out button. You can scroll around the photo to look for a particular animal that may be a little bit more difficult to find. You can also go to the edit photo portion and you can adjust the brightness, the contrast, the saturation, if you wanted to see if you can figure out exactly what it is we're looking at. That high contrast might not be the best for this particular photo. But at the end of the day, you'll get to a point where you're ready to make a classification or not. And so once you're ready to make a classification, you'll go to this portion right here. And the first thing you'll do is either accept the computer vision's classification, where you can say, yes, apply your guess to the entire sequence. So you can click right there and apply it to the sequence. Or let's say if this system happened to get it incorrect, you can go down to the edit and you can put in what the actual species was. So mule deer in this particular case, it'll pull up what that species was on the dropdown, and you can click it there. If there happened to be more than one individual, or if you could identify a juvenile, you have this little drop down arrow right here. You can click on that. You can adjust the number of individuals within the sequence. You can select relative age, and you can select relative sex. We are not requiring that age or sex is put down for any of the species that we're looking at, unless you can identify it directly. If you know that the juvenile is present, please do that. That'll save us some time on the back end. But if not, that's not necessarily important. The biggest things that are important are the species and the number of animals in the sequence. Once you're happy with an individual identification, you can say update images. It now says, okay, I have logged that each one of these 6 photos belongs to one mule deer. You click save, and it'll take you to the next sequence. Any questions so far before we go any further? Any questions on the actual identification tool within Wildlife Insights? Let me see, I'll pull up the Q&A here. So Garrett asked, would you rather us take a guess at the sex, age, or leave it blank if we're uncertain? That's a really great question. If you are uncertain at all and you're guessing, it's probably best to just leave it blank. It's much easier for us on the back end to go through the system and look at all of the photos that have more than one individual or something like that, and then identify age and juvenile or age and sex. It's a little bit easier for us to kind of do that on the back end. Whereas it's a lot more difficult for us to correct incorrect tags. And so that's why it's really important that if you're unsure at all of what that individual animal is, or if there's a juvenile present or not, it's much safer to just leave that information blank or to move on to the next classification than it is to guess and potentially get that guess incorrect, because that actually is much more difficult for us in the back end to correct than it is for us to go in and make the correct classification if it's still in the identify folder. Yeah, great question. And then an anonymous person said, can we review a photo that isn't too obvious? Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at something like this, and maybe we can open it up to what people think this is. Let's see if I can find one here that has something that's a little less. There we go. Okay, so here we have a photo of an animal in the distance. And does anyone have any idea what this thing is? You can put it in the chat or the Q&A. Anyone want to guess? The computer says it's a red fox. Danielle says, is it a moose? That's a good one. That's a difficult one. It's a good one to pick up on. Let's see. Do we have any other guesses? Kayla also says a moose. This is very, very good. These are good guesses. But this is actually a great example of why it's really important to highlight this. And so the first thing that we can take from this is that all of these photos were gathered along the Jordan River, because this is the Salt Lake City area. You may or may not have known that, but one thing you can do to actually check that, and that actually is a great thing to look at when you our identifying photos is if you go to metadata, you can zoom in and it will show you where this photo was actually taken. And so Steve is now saying, oh, maybe it's a coyote. So we can see now that this was along the Jordan River, right by West Jordan and Midvale. And so that is your first clue of what type of animals you may be looking at here. And so we've got Linda saying it's a fox, and saying and agreeing with the computer system. And these are all great. Keep putting your guesses out there. But this is where we can actually utilize all the resources within Wildlife Insights to figure out exactly what this is. So the first things first is I'm going to view the high resolution image, and I'm going to zoom in to figure out exactly what this thing is. So here's the best view we're probably going to get of this animal. This is actually pretty tricky to identify. But there are a few things that we can do to actually get this thing nailed down. And I think what's really important here to note is that we've already got 3 people that have guessed that it is 3 different species. In this particular case, what I would do if I were someone else looking through the system is I would skip this photo. I don't know if any of us can be 100% certain that they know what this animal is. So I would most likely skip this sequence. But I can tell you right now, just because I've been doing this for a really long time, this actually is a red fox. And the system did get it correctly here. Biggest thing we can note out, this is a bushy tail that is darker than the rest of the body. We can see the black pointed ears if you look really carefully right here. We can see the lighter hair on the cheeks. And these are all really nitty gritty. I wish we could actually see the legs where you could see that they're black and then the white tip on the tail. That would be the really defining features for the red fox. But this is in fact a red fox. But since the vast majority of us kind of disagreed on this classification, I think it's really important to note that this would be a good one to potentially skip and leave unidentified. So thank you, whoever put that question out there, because this was a great example. I think this would be another really good one of an animal that might be really difficult to identify. Again, we could view the high resolution image. And again, this is actually a red fox. So the computer system got it correct again, but you can actually see the black legs right there. You can see the pointed ears again. And so I hope this is giving you a little bit of a taste of how ambiguous some of these classifications can be and why it's so vitally important that before you make that classification, you're 100% certain of exactly what it is you're looking at. Okay.
Austin, can you please speak to the value of, even if you don't know the species, the huge amount of work just to sort that there is a wildlife of any species captured in an image?
Yeah, that's great, actually. So, and thank you for bringing that up. I should have talked about that. So let's say in this particular case, we have no idea what this actual animal is, but it's very clear to us that there is an animal present. One thing that makes it really easy for us on the back end to go through and identify is if you either A, can leave it blank, or if you can identify to the family, which would be great, what the animal is. In this case, the computer got it correctly. It is in the canine family. Or if you can simply just put that there is an animal there, there's an option to do unknown. And if you just click on unknown and save that as the classification, that makes it really easy for us to go into the cataloged portion of the photos. And it allows us to then search species unknown. And we can then from there go in and figure out what all of those classifications are. And so, yeah, that is a really great thing, because the thing that holds us up the most in any type of analysis project is just the sheer amount of blank photographs that we upload. And those blank photographs contain no animals at all. If we didn't have those photos, we would be caught up on all year's data almost immediately after we upload them. And so if you're able to simply identify that there's an animal present, whether or not you can identify what that animal specifically is a ton of help, because then that allows us to go through and remove all of these blank photos where animals are not included. And if we can even just get to that step, that alone saves vast amounts of time. Excellent. Okay, so then the last portion of this project that I'll talk a little bit about is uploading photographs. And again, this is actually broken down much better than what I'm going to do right now in that YouTube video. And so I highly recommend, again, that you check that out. I'm just going to walk you through how to potentially upload images to Wildlife Insights. And then if you have any particular questions that are pertaining to your SD card, that YouTube video will do a much better job of explaining that. Okay, so let's say we've gone into our account and we've looked at the Wasatch Wildlife thing, and there's no photos left in the system to be tagged like we have right now, but we have an SD card that we want to upload. The first thing we do is let me know that you have an SD card that you want to upload, and you would send all of those different coordinates. Let's say you'd send the GPS coordinates, you would send everything that I would need to create that site in the system. I'll then send you a note saying that site's been created. You're ready to upload whenever you want. You'll then go and you'll click on this green upload button right here. This will take you to your Finder, or if you're using a Windows, it'll take you to the startup menu where you go through your photos. From there, you'll locate your SD card if you have one planted in, and you'll click on the photos there. I'm just going to use these ones right here. And you'll navigate to all of the photos in the system. You'll select all of those photos, and you'll click on the upload button. Wildlife Insights will then load all of those in automatically, and it'll assign the project that you are within automatically as well. And so everybody here will automatically be assigned to the www Community Science Project. So that should automatically fill out. The only thing that you will have to select is the camera deployment. And so that'll either be listed on the SD card that you're uploading, or if you're uploading your own sites, you'll know the SD card and the camera deployment name because it'll be on your data sheets. So what you'll do is you'll type in whatever name you're looking for. Let's say we're looking for Red Butte 01 .2020. And then you'll click on the upload button. It will then pull up an upload progress screen that will notify you once your photos are in the system. I'm obviously not going to upload these random photos to this random site. So I'm going to skip clicking the upload button there, but that's the last step. Once your photos have been uploaded, you'll then notice that the Identify tab will now have a red number associated with it. And if you click in there, your photos will be there to start tagging. Okay. So that is the breakdown for how Wildlife Insights works and some things to note about it. One thing I wanted to show everybody really quickly, and this is the last portion of the project. None of this is technically required, but highly recommended. So let's say we're going through this project and we find a photo that we just absolutely love. So I'm going to navigate. And in fact, let's actually use this other project's photo. So let's say we're looking through our photographs and we see a sequence that just has an awesome photo of wildlife, and we think it's fantastic and we want to share it with the rest of the group. What you'll do is, if it comes in a sequence like this, you can select the photo that's your favorite from that sequence. And when you click on it, there's an option to highlight that photo. It's really important that we click on that button, because what that allows us to do is then share that photo with the rest of the group. And so that is where we then can promote the project. We can then use these photos moving forward as identification or stuff like that. And so that, by clicking that button, we'll then save that photo. And what we can then do from there, and I highly recommend that once you get added to the project, you do this yourself. If we wanted to say, let's look into the catalog photos and let's look at all of the, in this particular case, Puma photos that we have cataloged, we could actually do that. And then we could sort it by the ones that we think are cool by highlighting it. And it will pull up all of the top highlighted photos of mountain lion from the project. And what's really great about this is if you, let's say, wanted to share this, that you're working on this project on social media, or you wanted to share these photos with your friends or your family or anything like that, this would be a great way for you to actually go on and do that. And you can directly download the photos from the Wildlife Insights project and in this particular case. Of course, this is taking 10 years for this particular one to pop up, but you can see that there's been 12 photos so far highlighted of mountain lion here. It's a great way to actually see some of the coolest ones. This is kind of cool, this particular one. This is a female and a male mountain lion during courtship, right before and right during the mating season. And what's really awesome about this particular photograph, I uploaded this camera, and if Danielle Terry is on, she was the one that actually set up this camera, her and her dad. About a week or so after this, or about 2 or 3 weeks or so after this, we have a photo of this female pregnant, which is pretty incredible. So it's just kind of fun to follow these animals, and it's really cool to get the best photos saved. And so if you want to go ahead and do that extra step, it helps a ton with just being able to kind of share this awesome project and share all these awesome animals with people. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Mary. Or Mary, did you want me to kind of close out this presentation?
Well, that sounds great, Austin. I think, let's see, we're just a smidge over our time, but I think we probably have time for, another trivia question, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So which two species are most commonly confused in the image analysis? And we'll see what the top choice is. Is it mule deer gets confused for elk, or vice versa? Do fox get confused for coyote, or vice versa? Or do bobcat and mountain lion get confused with one another? And Sarah can kind of see the answers once most people have answered. Let's see the results.
Yep, 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna end it. Looks like most people chose fox and coyote.
Very interesting. And the answer is all of them.
It was a trick question.
So yeah, Austin, maybe you can speak to that a little bit, but basically you guys saw in that tricky fox example that it can be tricky.
Yeah, it can be extremely difficult to identify these animals. And even if you have spent your entire life in the Wasatch viewing these things, it can really trip you up, especially when you start looking at those night vision photos. Your eyes like to play tricks on you. So, really familiarize yourself with all these different species before you make those difficult classifications. Because again, I can't reiterate this enough. It's amazing. Even if you can just identify that there's an animal present, that helps so much within the system. And so whether or not you know exactly what that animal is, it's okay to just say that it's unknown. And actually, it's probably preferred than to guess and potentially get it wrong.
Yeah, and we have a great question from Stephen Schmidt, and I think we do want to make some clarification around this. So can we share photos with family, but not post them on social media? Please clarify. So one thing I just want to say, and Austin can say this again, so we love that you can share photos with people. The human photos that get uploaded, we do not want to share any human photos, period. And so once those get uploaded to Wildlife Insights, they actually get masked, but the data on the back end we can still use. So we can keep track of human activity, but privacy and identity and all those things are protected on Wildlife Insights. So if you are actually uploading photos that have people, absolutely don't want to share those. In terms of like the charismatic wildlife photos that you see, how are we having people check in before they post them different places, or what are you feeling on that, Austin?
Yeah, I've had people post, and I think it's best if you can let either Mary, Sarah, or myself know that you would like to post a photo on social media. But at least for me, I think it's 100% fair and open game to post photos on social media of awesome wildlife that you're finding in your cameras, or as you're tagging wildlife. I think it's great to post those. Again, I can't reiterate enough, though, how important it is that you do not post human photos onto social media. And so as we're uploading photos to Wildlife Insights, it is actually imperative that we upload the human photos to Wildlife Insights, because that's how we directly calculate human recreational activities. So that's how we actually do the types of analyses like the weekend effect paper that we were talking about. We have to have those human detections on camera in order to make those calculations. So it's vital that we upload those human photos, and it's vital that we classify and tag when humans are in particular photographs. But like Mary said, the minute you tag that a human being is in the photograph, it automatically then masks that photo within Wildlife Insights. And so that portion is okay. But the big thing to note there is that there's that time in between when that photo is uploaded of a human and when it's tagged before it gets blurred. And it is vital. We can actually have the project completely shut down if you upload photos of human beings. That's a violation of their privacy. And so if you want to upload photos, it's best practice to just check in with Mary, myself, or Sarah. But it is absolutely encouraged that you share awesome wildlife photos with anybody that you see fit.
And so just in the interest of time, I think, yeah, we do want to open it up to more questions that are coming in. So keep the questions coming in the chat. I just think it's valuable for us to go over the do's and don'ts quickly again. So the Wildlife Insights etiquette. Austin, do you want to remind us of the things we absolutely hope that you do? And another reminder, this whole recording will be available to you and will be linked on the website with those other materials that we've shared at the bottom of the Wasatch Wildlife Watch page. And you'll get an email with all those links again. So no need to furiously write notes. You'll get all this information that you can refer back to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's fly through this etiquette. So the first thing is the do's. So please do sort the images before uploading. Like I said, that's that pre-sorting process. And really that actually saves you time just as much as it saves us time, because Wildlife Insights, the slowest part of Wildlife Insights is when the photos are actually going into the system, because the artificial intelligence kicks in and it has to do that for each individual photo. So if you upload 10,000 photos of blank photographs, it's going to take a very, very long time for the system to load that in. Whereas if you're only uploading 100 or 200 of the wildlife photographs, because you pre-sorted those images out, it goes much quicker. And so it both just basically doesn't bog down the system, and it's actually just best practice, and it is the quickest way to upload those photos. So please do the sorting if you can beforehand. Definitely tag the animals that you're 100% on ID. So if there's a clear photo of a mule deer, then please identify it as a mule deer. No need to put unknown for every single identification, only the ones that you're not 100% sure on. If you can, feel free to include the age information. It is not vital though. And so that's important to note. The two things that are vital is whether or not an animal is present and the number of animals that are present in that individual sequence. And so that just leads to the next do, include the number of animals that are actually in there. And please include the total sequence information. And so what that means is, let's say we have 6 photos of wild turkey walking through the system. And in some of the photos, there's 4 turkey present. In other photos, there's 8 turkey present. The count that you're going to include is the maximum for that sequence. And so you would go ahead and say that the count for that sequence is 8, even though in some photos there may only be 4 or so. And then please, this is more just for myself for housekeeping purposes. please let me know once those photos have been uploaded and tagged in the system so that I can actually go through and I just do a quick QC of the photos that are uploaded. And it's really great to be able to do that in real time. So if you've gone through and you've tagged images for a particular deployment, it helps me a ton if you send me a message afterwards just saying, hey, I went through and I tagged the images from site, Big Cottonwood number 4. And then the last do is just please remember, if you have time and you think an image is really awesome, to click that favorite button so that it can be shared with everybody. And then I think the next one is the don'ts. We can move. Oh, yeah. Okay. And so then please do not, again, favorite human images. We don't want, because even if you favorite a human image, it'll still actually show up as a blank image in the catalog section because it will remove that image. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is that please keep the human images private and as private as possible. It's important that we get them uploaded into the system. But it is also important that we do not share that information widely or publicly with anybody. Another do not is to tag animals you're not 100% sure with. It's really difficult to go and change elk classifications that were tagged in the system as mule deer classifications. What it means is we have to search through each individual mule deer classification and make sure that there's not a hidden elk or moose in there. And so if you're not entirely sure what the animal is, it's best to just put unknown or to skip it. And then only upload a subset of your camera's photos if there are more than 2,000 or 3,000 photos on the SD card. That is typically kind of the max, at which point, if you try to upload more than that at one time, Wildlife Insights can tend to crash. And so I've always just tried to keep it under 3,000. The great thing about the system is that you can upload multiple times to the same site. Please do not ignore the count of non-human animals. And so again, if there's more than one mule deer in a photo, please count that they're the total number of mule deer and keep that in there. And do not at the moment trust the AI. It's getting better and better every single time someone uploads a photo. And we even saw that from today. It somehow was able to identify that that fox was actually a fox. And so it's getting better literally every single time someone uploads a photo, but we're still not to the point where we're trusting it 100% yet. And then do not forget to back up photos if they're going to be mailed back through, let's say, like, snail mail or something like that. If you're sending your SD cards through snail mail or something like that, that is the only time where it is important that you back up those SD cards on your own personal computer in case that mail gets lost, which has happened before. And then, of course, no uploading human images to social media. Definitely upload them to Wildlife Insights, but not to your social media sites.
Keep the questions coming. I think we'll also do one more trivia question. So which 2 species are known to travel, forage, and hunt together? Is it coyote and fox, coyote and badger, coyote and weasel? So hopefully we broke this up with some fun trivia for you guys, but if there are more questions, feel free to keep them coming in the question and answer, and we will keep track of those.
5 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end it. I was like to give people a second. Okay, let's see what the results are.
Nice.
54% coyote and badger.
Yeah, so if you search coyote and badger, there are so many videos that come up and it's so fun. You can see them walking through little underpasses under the road, and you can see one, either the coyote or the badger, really looking like they're waiting for their buddy. They even like kind of backtrack and then they walk through together. There are videos where they're foraging on carcasses together. Videos where it seems like they're kind of corralling animals together. So it's just really interesting. It looks like something straight out of a Disney movie where they just look like best pals. So that's kind of a fun little tidbit, but yeah, I guess we just want to make sure we'll keep answering questions, but I just want to make sure we give you all a big thank you. As Austin said, not only is it super valuable to have those community scientists out in the field, some folks have cameras just off the trail, in a cemetery, in a park, in their neighborhood. Others are hiking literally hundreds of miles into wilderness areas, moving trail cameras in a season. And then we have folks like you who are really helping with the backlog of data. And like I said, it can be, if you don't have SD cards from the field work, it can be as simple as just keeping up with our email communications. We will let you know when we get lots of photos uploaded to Wildlife Insights. And if you've got an account created and you're ready to go, you can help us sort through those images so that we can start answering those fundamental questions about wildlife movement on the landscape sooner than later. And with that, I will go to any more questions that we have in the chat. So feel free to keep them coming. I think a clarifying question from one of our attendees. So he said, they say marketing unknown for no animal doesn't seem to be helpful when Austin says that's identifying that an animal exists. So I'm not sure, maybe if you can clarify that, Austin. Again, there's just millions of photos, literally, and many of them, the camera is triggered by a blade of grass moving or changing light, things like that. And so if you can note that you see an animal and just kind of move it to that categorized, or sorry, that sorted category for photos, that does help with the backlog immensely, even if you cannot identify the animal. Austin, maybe you can clarify a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that hits the nail really right on the head. At the end of the day, and again, the YouTube video that's posted actually breaks this down specifically, showing how easy it is once we have all of the animal photos sorted into the catalog folder, how to then go through the rest of the photos and mass select them so that we can sort them as blank photos. And that's really where that ticker is. And so if someone just simply wants to go through the system and identify all the photos that have animals in them, even if they just put unknown for every single one of those photos, that then allows me to really kind of clear house on the rest of the photos as blanks. And so that process goes really fast once those animals have been identified. And so marking it as no animal is not something you're going to do if there's an animal present in the photo, but marking it as unknown then separates that photo into the cataloged tab, and then the rest of them, if they're identified as blanks, or if we know that they're blanks, instead of having to go to each individual photo and say it's blank, I can actually mass select them and remove them from the system, which makes it go much quicker. And so that's why identifying those photos as unknown really helps, even if you're not entirely sure what the animal is in the particular photo.
And we have another question. Would you like volunteers to specialize on one location?
That's kind of completely up to every individual, I guess. So if you feel more comfortable looking at photos from Salt Lake City, because those are the species that you are more accustomed to looking at, you can actually go into the system and only search the photographs from sites within Salt Lake City. And so those drop-down menus, they have species, they have camera deployment, and they have sub-project, which is where you can sort out whether or not you want to look through one location or the other. And so if you feel more comfortable with that, please feel free to specialize in one particular area, but you definitely don't have to. And it's actually kind of fun to look at the variation in wildlife species that you pick up from one location to the next. And so I would advise that if you're, feeling more comfortable, go ahead and do it. But if not, take a chance and, enjoy looking through all the photos from the entire study system.
I don't see any more questions. I think we are good to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around for a couple more minutes if anybody else has questions, but again, just a huge thank you for folks participating live and asking questions live. It's really valuable, even for people who are going to watch the recording later. So thank you for your time, for your interest in the project.
Same. Yes. Thank you, everybody. And I'm happy to stay after a little bit as well, if there are any questions that come in.
Perfect. I can't wait to see what folks see out there. I love seeing the things that come in. I'm excited. Thanks everyone for joining.
And just to clarify for anyone still on, all the materials will be on our website. We'll also send an email back to folks who signed up for the training with the recording and links to the materials again. So if you missed parts of the live event or you want to share this with somebody after the fact, all those resources will be available. So you can definitely still participate. And just one quick question, you will need to set up an account to participate, and there are instructions on how to do that.
Yep. Yeah. You'll definitely need, even if you're just tagging images and not uploading directly from an SD card, you'll still need to create an account.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Looks like we might be done with questions and a minute to spare. Hooray.